Bruce Rauner will in fact shake up Springfield and try to work with the Democratic legislature. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. The state's a biggie today. We have a new governor-elect. Bruce Rauner was able to overcome Pat Quinn in the November 4th election, and there's a lot to talk about because things will indeed change in Springfield. Here to talk about it, people who watch this stuff a lot. Bob Gough is back, editor of QuincyJournal.com. Thanks for making the ride to Springfield for this show. Charlie Wheeler, former Sun-Times guy for years and director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at University of Illinois Springfield, also for years. Charlie, welcome back.
Thank you, Bernie. It's always good to be here.
And Patrick Yeagle is here. He is a reporter in Springfield with the Illinois Times, the weekly.
Thanks, Bernie.
Okay, what does this mean? We're going to have a new governor. We have a state budget with significant problems over time. Bob.
Well, the people of Illinois opted to go for the devil they didn't know as opposed to the devil they knew. Rauner did very well downstate. I did not think he would do as well as Brady did, but he did, especially in Adams County. He ended up with a higher percentage.
Brady meaning, of course, Bill Brady 4 years ago.
4 years ago,
just
yes.
about beat Pat Quinn, but didn't.
Yes, and then Rauner, of course, did what he did in Cook County, which was, what was the final number?
I think it was, wasn't it 21% or so?
That was in the city
or
of
just
Chicago.
The city of Chicago.
Yeah.
County overall was over 30. Well
okay.
over 30,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was between 30 and 40.
So I think we have to see what he's announced his transition team as we put together this program, and it's a chance to see what this guy is going to do, and it's going to be different. We haven't had anything like this in quite some time, but I know there are a lot of people out there saying the career politicians and the insiders have done such a bang-up job so far. Let's try something else.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Patrick second because I know Charlie has always strong thoughts, and he's our budget expert, and budget is important here. But Patrick, just general thoughts about, were you surprised Election Day, and what do you think the effect is on Springfield with the new governor coming into town?
I have to say, I actually was surprised that Rauner did actually. I have to stop saying Rauner. It's Rauner. That Rauner actually did win because Pat Quinn had surged in the polls. Rauner had led very early and seemed to lead quite up. Pretty close to Election Day, and Pat Quinn, last time pulled a rabbit out of the hat at the last minute, and this time he just wasn't able to, and I think that surprised some people. In terms of how it's going to shake up Springfield, you can say a lot of things on the campaign trail. You can say pretty much whatever you want. When you get into office, though, sometimes things are not quite as simple as they appear on the outside, and I think we see that with President Obama. He wants to do all these things that he apparently can't do. We've seen that with Pat Quinn for sure. He says all these things and then never comes to fruition. I think unfortunately for Rauner, he's going to see the same thing probably, that you want to shake things up, but you find out that a lot of the things that are the way they are the way they are because of the way things are.
Okay, and Charlie, I know you'll talk about budget when we get to you, but Bruce Rauner did say he wants more money for schools. He wants to freeze property taxes, which I know you had a pithy comment about that I saw in one of the papers during the campaign. He wanted to give more money to Department of Natural Resources and cut waste out of government and lower taxes.
A chicken in every pot.
and there were 3 chickens at one of his
Model
press
T
conferences.
in every garage.
So what as a longtime watcher of state government and with Bruce Rauner coming in with apparently extraordinary majorities still in the hands of Democrats in the House and the Senate, and we have a new Republican governor who has been very critical of those in power, but now says he wants to work with them. What do you see in our near future?
Well, I'm chuckling because you hear this rhetoric about, it's a new day in Springfield, we're going to shake up Springfield, and all this nonsense. The fact of the matter is the problems that the state government faces today are the ones that they faced a week ago, are the ones that are going to confront Mr. Rauner when he gets sworn into office. The state's finances need to be addressed. And it can't be this magic pixie dust about, we're going to roll back taxes and we're going to increase spending. I mean, how are you going to do that unless he is planning on personally bankrolling the state? It ain't going to work. Fact of the matter is, he is going to, unless the law is changed in early February, or late February, he's going to have to propose a budget. Spending money no greater than the amount of available resources. That's what the law says. And Pat Quinn followed it, and it's been followed for the last several years. And the resources are going to be roughly $4 billion less than they are now, because the income tax rates are going to roll back on January 1st. There's no doubt about that. And so he's going to have to come in and decide either he makes draconian cuts and forget about more money for everybody, or he's going to have to propose some kind of an income tax increase.
Or he said, or service taxes. I mean, he talks about.
Well, or service
because
taxes,
he said
or something.
He wants a
but
to
this
look at all the
nonsense,
tax structure
this
and
nonsense
flatter.
about we'll have economic growth and it'll do it. If you look at the numbers, you would have to increase the, what would you say, the jobs out there by roughly 20% to generate as much in income and sales taxes as you get from the money you're going to lose. And so it's just a very difficult situation. And he really didn't explain on the campaign trail how he's going to do any of this, not in a way where the numbers added up to people who actually follow it. I mean, it's not just me. You know, I'm not the only guy who can do arithmetic. A lot of other people said the same thing. And he was quizzed by editorial boards, including your people, and you really couldn't get a decent answer. And you understand that, maybe, because when you're running for governor, you don't want to tell the electorate the hard truth, that you're either going to have to get less, you're going to have to pay more. We've coasted for decades on getting, in essence, a free lunch because we've shafted the pension systems. To Quinn's credit, the last several years, we have funded the pension systems as required by law under this plan that's supposed to get them 90% funded by 2045. And that's something that is going to have to be dealt with. And it's just a huge, huge problem. It's probably a $6, $7, $8 billion problem that they face in trying to put together a budget for the fiscal year 2016.
Yeah, and of course, many people think, including Rauner, that the pension fix that the legislature passed that Pat Quinn signed, which cuts back on some future benefits even for current retirees. Rauner says all those people should be safe, but the Supreme Court will say our Constitution doesn't allow that, and they will overturn the law, and then we're back to square one with another bigger problem with pensions.
Yeah, and this notion that Bruce Rauner has of we'll put everybody in a 401k, that sounds good. That's what they've done in the private sector. It puts all the risk on the employee. The corporations get to walk away from the pension obligations. They declare bankruptcy. They shove it on the federal government. Adios. They can't do that at the state level. And if you think about it, right now pensions are funded in theory by three different sources. The money that comes from the employee, and I'm a member of the state university's retirement system, so every paycheck I get docked, money goes into the pension. In theory, the state is supposed to put in a share, and the money I put in, the money the state puts in for myself, for state employees, for public school teachers outside the city of Chicago, that money gets invested, and the return on investment becomes part of the pot that's used to pay the benefits. Well, for probably longer than anyone watching this show has been alive, the state has not put in its share as it was supposed to under actuarial standards. So we have this huge outstanding obligation.
Of about
Now,
$100 billion.
Yeah, and now if suddenly we go to a 401k, if I'm in a 401k and I'm contributing into this separate pot, I'm not putting money into the other pot. Those obligations remain. Rauner says he's going to keep all the retirees, will still get what they're getting. But one of the major sources of funding will disappear. And
Well, he says that the state will pony up for that too because of the things he will do.
Yeah, and,
We'll see
and
where it
how
goes.
much will that be when a substantial amount of money that gets put in right now comes from deductions from people who are in the system?
And the other problem with that is when you're talking about reducing the employees, I know one problem that many municipalities have is the fact that the police and fire pensions are currently running. I know in Quincy, for example, the police and fire pension fund is currently running at about half of what the salary total is for those police and firefighters. So if a city like Quincy wants to say, hey, we're going to whack police and firefighters, then you have fewer people paying into that, and then the problem, you have to keep that staffing level consistent if you want to continue to repay the pension.
And interesting, you bring Quincy is just one of all of the municipalities across the state that have pension problems, in addition to what we were just talking about, which is the $100 billion state pension problem.
Yeah.
Patrick, we can just purely speculate, but we've got the Democratic legislature. We've got, Mike Madigan still has 71 members. Apparently, unless something changed, but that's the way it looks like the election came out. They lost one Democrat in the Senate, but that means they're still 39, and they had 40 to 19, so it'll be 39 to 20. Still an extraordinary majority and a veto-proof majority. So you think the legislature will work with Bruce Rauner, or will give him trouble and make the 4 years horrible so that maybe a Democrat gets elected 4 years from now?
Well, you know, that's an interesting question because, you know, we've seen what the relationship between Pat Quinn and Mike Madigan has been like. And if it doesn't look like Bruce Rauner has started off on the right foot with Madigan, so I think that's probably going to be anybody's guess. But I'm not putting a whole lot of hope in my chest for Bruce Rauner in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking, you know, it's funny, now he's talking about we want to make Illinois competitive and compassionate. I didn't hear the word, I don't recall hearing him talk about compassionate until it was election night.
Right.
And then it reminds me a little of George Bush and compassionate conservatism, but we want to be, you know, I think he wants to make sure after the bad stories, the bad advertisements against his businesses with nursing homes and things, that he does care about people that the state has to care for. So he's still talking competitive, which is get our businesses up, get our tax revenues up in that way, but we want to take care of the people the state has to take care of. So anyway,
it's kind of ironic that he used the word compassionate, because a lot of people on the good government side say that the sales tax and service tax idea is a regressive tax because it hurts the people at the lower end of the income spectrum more than the people at the high end. And so if we're talking about compassion, who's getting the compassion there if we go to that model
well,
of
he is
taxation?
talking about the people in need, but anyway, I understand your point.
And I think what's going to happen is he's going to go through one session, and then he's going to realize he needs to start ponying up for downstate Republican House and Senate races, and we're going to see another Rauner influx of another $20 million in 2016 in legislative
You think
races.
he'll come with?
But he tried to do that this time, and that didn't work this time. Maybe because of people blame the map, but you still have voters electing a majority of Democrats.
But he obviously had to spend a lot of his own money on himself in 2014. He doesn't have to in 2016.
Charlie, what do you think? I mean, obviously, if the Democrats play hardball and don't give Rauner the money he needs to govern effectively, that means that services, the DCFS workers, the food programs, whatever, will suffer. Prisons have to have enough guards, etc. Do you think they'll play hardball with him, or cut him some slack and let him govern with enough resources to get moving?
I suspect that they're not going to cut him slack initially. Part of it was he campaigned against how, one-third, I guess it was one-third of Republicans in the legislature are corrupt. All the Democrats are. Madigan and Cullerton and Quinn are to blame for everything that's gone wrong in Illinois.
It's 100 years of failure, I believe.
Yeah,
the ad said,
so
and their pictures were up there.
And so if I'm a Madigan or a Cullerton, being human, I'm thinking to myself, here this arrogant guy is. He comes in, he's got no qualifications for the job. He's trying to take the top job at treating it as entry-level position. Why should I cut him any slack? Let him come to me. I'm willing to deal, but here's the things I want. And if he wants to give them to me, fine. But if he doesn't, let him figure out how to do it. And part of it is and I know the editorial writers like to blame, particularly the Tribune, blame the Democrats for everything that's gone wrong in Illinois since Abe Lincoln's assassination. But as a matter of fact, for most of the time when these problems were really developing, we had a Republican governor and a Democratic General Assembly. And those Republican governors, Jim Thompson, Jim Egger, George Ryan, worked fine with the Democrats and with Madigan and Cullerton's predecessors. And it was the kind of deal, okay, what do you need, Bob? And this is what you need for DuPage County. This is what we need for Chicago. We'll cut a deal and we'll pass it and everybody goes home happy. And I can see that happening if Rauner is willing to do that. But on the budget stuff, I was telling Patrick before the show, if I'm a Republican lawmaker, I have to be sweating bullets, realizing that come May, I'm going to be voting for stuff that I've railed against for years. I'm going to walk the plank for my leader.
And you're saying that that's revenue or tax increases of some sort?
It'll be a tax increase, it'll be draconian budget cuts. And so all the Republicans who've had this free ride all these years, they could stand on the sidelines and throw stones. It's all the Democrats' fault. Now they're going to have to pony up and be part of the solution.
So you think Rauner, and I think I know the answer to this because you've said it, but you think Rauner has no choice but to do those things because those are things he said he wouldn't do? that where his goals are so different
I
from
don't-
more taxes or less services?
I think that the arithmetic, the math is unrelenting. I don't see how you get around it. By law, he has to propose a budget where the expenditures don't exceed the estimated revenues. Now, he could ask the General Assembly to change the law. I don't see that happening. And he also has to fully fund the pensions unless they change the law. He also has to pay off the debts that we've incurred. Every year, it's like having a mortgage payment. You pay principal and interest. Well, we do that every year. That law you can't even change. It's written in such a way that the law cannot be amended. The statute can't be changed until all our bonds are paid off, and that'll come, the day after never.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, we'll
I don't
see.
see he's got any choice.
Governor-elect Rauner did announce a transition team this week. The chairperson of that is Evelyn Sanguinetti, who is the lieutenant governor-elect. There are then Nancy Kimmey is a transition advisor, and she is chief of staff to Judy Bartopinka, the comptroller who won re-election. So she knows Springfield very well. And then other members were from his campaign organization: Mike Schrimpf, Chip Inglinger, Mike Zolnirovich, if I pronounced that one right. But then further members announced later in the week: Bill Daley, who is a Democrat, brother of former Mayor Daley, and Governor Jim Edgar is among those, and then others there were a number of other people, including Congressman Aaron Schock from Peoria. So he's trying to, and former State Senator James Meeks, who is African American and one of the church leaders in Chicago who backed Rauner.
Well, Representative Jill Tracy also.
Representative Jill Tracy of Quincy. So is it looking like he's getting together the kind of team that can make sense of all this and be ready for Inauguration Day and beyond?
I think there are some people on there who do have some knowledge of state government and some knowledge of the budget. That's mandatory. Probably not enough of them, but there are some. And then a lot of the other people are a lot of the business people that you would expect. I believe he will have a stronger reach out effort as well. To more than just the election night phone calls to Madigan and Cullerton, and I think some of those people will eventually come and they'll be part of it as well.
Yeah. How important is this whole transition team thing?
It's something that all governors do. They have this transition team, and it's in theory it's a good idea. In practice, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on how willing the person is to listen to the transition team and the quality of the people on it, what their charge is, and if it's more for cosmetic purposes, if it's more for real. And I trust that Rauner is going to rely on these people to do a good job and present them some options. Because he's in a way coming into office, he's in the worst position of any incoming governor in the time I've been watching that, and it goes back a ways.
And when you say worst position, are you talking about the state's fiscal?
Yeah, just
situation?
The immediate problems that this governor faces are worse, are going to be more difficult than any other governor on his inauguration. Be it Richard Ogilvie, be it Dan Walker, be it Jim Thompson, be it Jim Edgar, be it George Ryan.
Interesting. Obviously, it was those problems that really helped Rauner overcome Pat Quinn in this election. And I just wonder, before we move way beyond Pat Quinn's 6 years in office, what do we think his legacy is? Obviously, he ended the death penalty. Same-sex marriage, Illinois became part of a wave of that, and not one of the last ones. It was like 17th or so, and now there's 30 states, and who knows if that goes further. Patrick, any thoughts on? He's got a couple months left. He wants to pass a minimum wage increase, which Rauner says he doesn't want done on its own without business reforms. But your thoughts about Governor Quinn?
Yeah, I think really, he took over from basically a really bad situation with former, now impeached governor, imprisoned governor Rod Blagojevich. And he took over in probably one of the worst moments in our state's history of just everybody was just feeling really down about the state. And to his credit, I think he handled that about as well as anybody could. He didn't really make any huge stumbles in terms of sending the state down some awful path or continuing the the corruption of his predecessor. A lot of people have faulted him, for not really being an effective leader, and I think there's probably some legitimacy to that because he really, he's not a charismatic guy, but at the same time, he was steady, and you knew where he stands. He always told you exactly where he stands on something, and a lot of times he would come up with, some idea, that was great and grand, and the implementation of that really wouldn't end up measuring up to what he had proposed. But all in all, I mean, I think he probably did about the best that he could with what he received.
Any other thoughts on the outgoing governor?
Well, I think you're going to look at it, and Patrick's absolutely right. The situation that he inherited and having to come in, on the Blagojevich mess and wade through that, and then he survived a tough campaign. And if you are of a progressive nature, he did do some good things, but he was not able to grasp the entirety of the budget problem. But I don't know if there's any human alive who's going to be able to do that. So.
See, and I would give him credit for hewing to the schedule laid out for retiring our pension obligations. As I said earlier, it was a 50-year schedule adopted in 1995. We're supposed to get to 90% funding by 2045. His budget included enough money for the annual payment as calculated under this 1995 law.
Which ramped way up under his term,
and
right about the time he took
it's up
office.
to like $6 billion or something this year. And he did that every year. Now, a lot of the income tax increase that people complained about and dinged him for, a big chunk of that went to pay for the pension increases. A big chunk of it went to pay off leftover bills when revenues declined. People forget that from basically the mid-1950s through the rest of the 20th century, every year, regular as clockwork, the state could rely on our revenue structure is going to bring in more dollars this year than last year, and so the question is, how are we going to divvy up the new money? Well, 4 times since the turn of the century, and this current fiscal year will be the 5th as the tax rates go down, the revenue structure actually brought in less than what we had the year before. And it's a lot easier to decide how to distribute the extra money than it is to decide how we're going to cut so that our money is sufficient to cover what we're going to pay for.
I always remember the talk in years past about, well, natural growth will give us this year. What do you do with it? And now it's like, what do you cut? Which is indeed hard.
And it's a totally new ballgame.
Later in the week, as we tape this show, the race for state treasurer is the only major race in the state undetermined, with Mike Frerichs, the state senator from Champaign, 9 or something under 20,000 votes behind Tom Cross, the Republican, and so it looks like Cross is going to be the next state treasurer unless there's a recount, but we don't know. That's just an interesting one because we went we really went back and forth. We have Jesse White, reelected Secretary of State, and Lisa Madigan, Democrats, easily reelected. And then the governor was kind of a drag on the Democratic ticket, perhaps. And of course, Senator Durbin is there. One of the big issues during the campaign was Rauner during the campaign. Governor-elect Rauner said government union bosses are a bad thing. So what should union government workers in Springfield and in state government and teachers unions think now that he is the governor and has a Democratic legislature? What will be the effect? Anybody have an idea?
I certainly have no idea, and the reason I say that is because he used a lot of rhetoric in the campaign, and it was messages that were tailored for a specific purpose. Mm-hmm. But if you go back and review it all, you really don't have a good sense of what he truly believes or what he really stands for. So I can see him working with the public employee unions simply because all this talk about, well, he's going to shut down government, he's going to cause a strike, he's going to break the unions, that was all garbage for the primary. I trust that he's a responsible enough adult that he won't try to do that as governor, and so you work out some accommodation. And to the extent of trying to bust the unions, well, he'd have to change the law. He can't do that by executive order, and there's no way under God's green earth or in God's green earth that Democratic majorities are going to allow the governor to pass a right.
That's right. Well, he talked a lot about Scott Walker as a role model, and we want to bring to Illinois.
And Scott Walker's got an overwhelmingly Republican
which
legislature,
is the difference.
so he could do all this
the
stuff.
Wisconsin governor, yeah.
He could try and cut the unions off at the knees because he had Republicans who were willing to do it. Illinois is a lot different than Wisconsin.
And I think, when you talk about that and you talk about how the unions were talking about Rauner, that's why I expected him to maybe struggle a little bit in Sangamon County. I expected him to struggle in Adams because we have the Illinois Veterans Home and we have a lot of state employees per capita in Adams County. But in looking at all the numbers, that never really came to fruition.
I really think, and I had to, in my pre-election column, I predicted Quinn would win, but then I had to, of course, eat those words because he didn't. And the further analysis was people are just tired of Quinn and the $50 million in negative ads about how terrible the state is and how terrible Quinn is certainly had their effect.
And I think it's worth noting also that the unions definitely were not all that happy with Pat Quinn either, and really the only reason that they backed Pat Quinn en masse, and of course AFSCME didn't really get involved in the money side of it. I think they did endorse Quinn, right? But they didn't.
They were unhappy with Quinn, and
Right.
certainly because he signed the
Yeah.
pension law that cut back on pensions.
Right.
So a lot of people were mad about that
Yeah.
and just would vote for anybody else.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
even
he
with
cut,
his rhetoric.
2,600 workers back in, 2010. He closed several state facilities.
Including in Jacksonville.
Yeah, he broke a contract that required raises for those workers. I mean,
And many did not forget.
yes,
Excellent
they gave
point.
him very many
Well,
reasons.
and
not
as
to
a matter
elect.
of fact, for like at least 2 weeks before the election, every day on like page 3 of your newspaper, there was an ad, black background, white letters. Pat Quinn wants to cut your pensions. Bruce Rauner won't.
Yeah, yes, and that was the Don Tracy group. We are just about out of time. I do want to just send out condolences. Former Congressman Lane Evans passed away, Rock Island, I believe.
Yeah.
He had to quit several years ago because of Parkinson's disease. He served more than 20 years. He was an ex-Marine. Best to him, and I think he has a legacy of certainly helping veterans and paying attention to the little guy.
Well, and being excellent on constituent
Yes,
service,
very
probably
much
the
so.
best that we've ever seen.
There you go. With that, Bob Gough, Charlie Wheeler, Pat Yeagle, thanks for joining me. Thank you. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.